Why are you kneeling for her?
She did not cry. That is the first thing you need to know about her. When his hand connected with her face, in front of 300 people, under crystal chandeliers, in the most expensive hotel in Seoul, she did not flinch. She did not gasp. She did not crumble the way he expected her to. She simply went still, like a queen who had just been handed a reason. And the room went silent in that terrible, breathless way that only happens when everyone present knows they have just witnessed something they will never forget. The man who struck her was not just any man. He was Park Ji-hoon. The name that made senators lower their voices. The name that made bodyguards straighten their spines just hearing it spoken in a room. The most feared, most untouchable man in all of South Korea. A man who had never once in his life faced a consequence. He was already turning away from her. Already dismissing her. Already forgetting she existed. And then, one of his bodyguards dropped to his knee. Just one, at first. Then another. Then another. Until all 12 of his elite guards, men who had never kneeled for a single soul on this earth except Ji-hoon himself, were on the floor. Heads bowed. To her. The champagne glasses stopped moving. The music cut out. Someone near the back of the room whispered something in Korean that roughly translated to, "Is that who I think it is?" Ji-hoon turned back around slowly. And the woman standing there, this tall, breathtaking, deep brown-skinned woman with her natural hair pinned like a crown and her cheek still carrying the sting of his hand, looked at him with the calmest, most dangerous smile he had ever seen in his life. Not angry. Not afraid. Just waiting. Like she had known this moment was coming. Like she had all the time in the world. And Park Ji-hoon, for the first time in 15 years, felt the ground shift beneath his feet. Because he suddenly understood. He had not slapped a stranger. He had just made the single worst mistake of his entire life. And something else was happening too, something he had not felt since he was 19 years old and still capable of feeling it. His heart was beating. Fast. Before we begin, my mum said this video cannot reach 10,000 views and 1,000 subscribers. Let's prove her wrong. Smash that like button right now, subscribe so you don't miss what happens next, and drop in the comments where you are watching from. I want to see you all out there. Now, let's get into this story. Because honey, it is going to take your breath away. Her name was Adwoa Mensah. 29 years old. Born in Accra, Ghana, on a Tuesday morning during a rainstorm so heavy that her grandmother had said, "This child came in like she owns the sky." She had spent her whole life proving the old woman right. She held a doctorate in international business law from Oxford. She spoke 5 languages, English, Chi, French, Mandarin, and Korean, all fluently, all without apology. She could walk into any boardroom on any continent and within 4 minutes identify exactly who held the real power, who was pretending, and who was afraid. She had negotiated contracts that moved billions. She had sat across tables from men twice her age and 3 times her arrogance, and she had never once blinked first. She also made the best jollof rice of anyone who had ever left Ghanaian soil, but that was a separate and deeply important matter. Tonight, she was standing in the Grand Hyatt Seoul ballroom in a deep wine-red gown that fit like it had been poured onto her body and left to dry. Her natural hair was pinned up in an elaborate style that had taken her hotel stylist 2 hours and had been absolutely worth every minute. She had a small gold clutch in one hand and a glass of Sabolo, hibiscus tea she had specifically requested because she did not drink alcohol at work events, in the other. She was not here as a guest. She was here as a representative. A senior legal envoy, to be precise, representing a coalition of 5 African governments in a series of trade negotiations that were set to begin in Seoul the following Monday. It was sensitive work. Important work. The kind of work that came with a specific diplomatic status that she had specifically requested remain quiet for another 2 weeks, until the formal announcements were made. She had wanted to attend tonight's charity gala as a private citizen. Just Adwoa. Just a woman in a beautiful dress, eating good food, watching powerful people pretend to be charitable. She had not planned to be noticed. She had certainly not planned this. It had started with something so small it was almost laughable. A server, young, nervous, carrying too many plates, had stumbled behind her. His tray had clipped her shoulder blade. Adwoa had turned instinctively, and her elbow had grazed the arm of the man passing on her left. His champagne had sloshed. It had not spilled. She would stake her Oxford degree on that. Not one single drop had left that glass. But the man had stopped walking. And he had looked at her. She had her first clear view of him in that moment, and even later, much later, when she was replaying the night in the warm privacy of her own heart, she would admit that her first thought had been entirely inappropriate for the situation. Because Park Ji-hoon was, objectively and irritatingly, one of the most beautiful men she had ever seen in her life. Tall. Sharp-jawed. Dark eyes that caught the chandelier light like deep water catches the moon. He wore his black suit the way certain men wear authority, like it was simply another layer of skin. But his expression was the coldest thing in the room. He looked at her the way people look at something they have accidentally stepped on. "Watch where you are going," he said in Korean. Flat. Dismissive. Adwoa answered in flawless Korean without even thinking about it. "I apologize. A server bumped into me. It was an accident." Something shifted in his face. She could not tell if it was her Korean that surprised him or the fact that she had answered at all instead of simply shrinking. Either way, the shift was not a kind one. His eyes moved over her. Slowly. In that specific way, that terrible, particular way, that told her exactly what category he had placed her in before she had spoken a single word. "You people," he said quietly, "always have an excuse." The ballroom did not hear it. It was said too low, too privately, meant only for her. But Adwoa heard it. Every syllable. "You people." She felt something rise in her chest. Not rage, she was too disciplined for uncontrolled rage. It was something colder and more precise than rage. It was the feeling she got when she encountered something that needed to be corrected. She opened her mouth. And he slapped her. Open-palmed. Across her left cheek. Not hard enough to send her stumbling, he was too controlled for that, but hard enough. Sharp enough. Public enough. The sound cracked through the nearest conversations like a stone through glass. Adwoa's head turned slightly with it. She breathed. One breath. Two. She touched her cheek with 2 fingers. And then, from somewhere deep in the part of her that her grandmother had built, the part that had survived boarding school bullies and Oxford gatekeepers and boardrooms full of men who thought her presence was a mistake, something settled. Calm. Clear. Absolute. Ji-hoon was already turning away. "Excuse me," Adwoa said. Her voice carried across the now silent ballroom like a note struck cleanly on a piano. Warm. Unhurried. Completely in control. "I don't believe we're finished." Ji-hoon stopped walking. At his sides, she watched his 12 bodyguards exchange a single look, the kind of fast, silent communication that people develop after years of working closely together in high-stakes situations. Then one of them, the largest, a man with a scar along his jaw whom she would later learn was called Sergeant Beck, pressed his finger to his earpiece. His face went through 4 different expressions in 2 seconds. He leaned to his right and whispered something to the guard beside him. That guard went the color of old paper. And then Sergeant Beck, slowly, deliberately, like a man doing something he had not done in a very long time and was doing now because he had absolutely no other choice, lowered himself to one knee. The second guard followed. The third. All 12, in a slow and devastating wave, kneeled on the marble floor of the Grand Hyatt Seoul. Facing Adwoa Mensah. The room made a sound she had never heard a room make before. It was somewhere between a gasp and a silence, like 300 people all forgot to breathe at the exact same moment. Ji-hoon turned back around. Adwoa met his eyes. She smiled, small, polite, patient, the smile of a woman who had never doubted the ending of this story, not for a single second. "Now," she said softly. "Shall we talk about that apology?" Park Ji-hoon stared at her. And for the first time in 15 years, he had absolutely nothing to say. Park Ji-hoon had a rule about apologies. He did not give them. Not to rivals. Not to allies. Not to the 12 governments whose officials had at various points requested, demanded, and begged for one. In 34 years of a life that had been difficult from the very first morning, a father who left before he could walk, a mother who worked 3 jobs and still came home to an empty refrigerator, streets that taught hard lessons to boys who could not afford to learn them slowly, Ji-hoon had survived by understanding one fundamental truth. The moment you apologize, you show people where your soft places are. And people who know where your soft places are will press on them until you break. So he did not apologize. Yet here he stood, in front of 300 witnesses, in front of his own kneeling bodyguards, in front of this impossible woman in a wine-red dress, and the word was trying to crawl up his throat against his own will. He killed it. Who are you? He asked instead. His voice was steady. Years of practice keeping it steady. Adwoa tilted her head. Now you want to know my name? Interesting timing. Who are you? She looked at him for a long moment. Then she reached into her small gold clutch and produced a card, cream-colored, heavy stock, embossed with a seal he recognized immediately because he had spent the last 2 years learning to recognize every seal that mattered in international politics. She held it out between 2 fingers. He took it. He read it. He read it again. Adwoa Mensah, J.D., Ph.D. Senior Legal Envoy, African Continental Trade Commission. Diplomatic Representative, Republic of Ghana. The seal in the corner was not just the Ghanaian government seal. It was the joint seal of 5 nations. Ji-hoon was quiet for a moment that stretched uncomfortably long. You're the envoy, he said. The words came out slightly flatter than he intended. I am, Adwoa said pleasantly. The one your government has been very eager to have favorable negotiations with, starting Monday. The one your Prime Minister personally sent a welcome letter to last week. She paused. The one you just slapped. Silence. Sergeant Beck, still on his knee, made a sound that in any other circumstance might have been a strangled cough. I see, Ji-hoon said. I thought you might. Adwoa smiled. Still no excuse, of course. Diplomatic status or not, you don't put your hands on a woman. But I thought the context might be useful for you, given the expression on your face. Ji-hoon looked at her. She looked back at him. Neither of them looked away. Something was happening that he did not have a category for. Because standing here, holding her card, staring into those eyes, dark and bright and entirely unbothered, he felt something that his mind kept misidentifying before he could name it. Then it landed. Curiosity. He was curious about her. He had not been genuinely curious about another human being since he was 22 years old. He did not like it. Rise, he said quietly to his guards. They rose without a word, seamlessly rearranging themselves as if the last 3 minutes had not dismantled everything they stood for. He would deal with the full explanation of their kneeling later. In private. With significantly more intensity. He looked back at Adwoa. You'll have your apology, he said. The words cost him something. She could see it. He could see that she could see it. I know, she said. Something about those 2 words, so simple, so utterly certain, hit him somewhere unexpected. Have dinner with me, he said. Adwoa blinked. For the first time since he had met her, which admittedly had been one of the worst introduction sequences in recorded human history, she looked genuinely surprised. I beg your pardon, she said. Tomorrow night. Dinner. He held out her card. To discuss the apology. Properly. She stared at him. Then she did something he had not expected. She laughed. Not a polite, social laugh. A real one, full and warm, rising up from somewhere genuine, completely uncontrolled. It lasted several seconds. Several people nearby turned to stare, confused, because laughter seemed like an impossible response to this particular situation. You slapped me, she said, still half smiling, and now you're asking me to dinner. Yes. You have extraordinary nerve. Yes, he agreed. She looked at him for a long moment. Then she reached into her clutch, produced her own card, and placed it on top of his champagne glass, which he was still, somehow, holding. 7 o'clock, she said. And you're paying. Extravagantly. She turned and walked back toward the buffet table, spine straight, gold clutch swinging lightly from her wrist, as if she had simply stepped out to check on something and was now returning. Ji-hoon watched her go. Behind him, Sergeant Beck leaned slightly forward and murmured, barely audible, Sir. That is the most powerful diplomatic contact we have encountered in 6 years. I know, Ji-hoon said. You struck her. I know. In public. Beck. Yes, sir. Stop talking. Yes, sir. Ji-hoon looked down at the tar on his champagne glass. Then he looked up at the wine-red dress moving gracefully through the crowd. And for the first time in a decade and a half, Park Ji-hoon smiled. Not the cold, controlled smile he used as a weapon. A real one. Small. Private. Gone before anyone could see it. But real. Adwoa spent the entire next morning telling herself she was not going. She was a professional. She was here on important government business. She did not have dinners with men who had slapped her, regardless of how remarkably their faces had been arranged by whatever forces govern such things. She called her best friend Afro back in Accra at 7 in the morning Seoul time, which made it midnight in Ghana, and Afro answered on the second ring because that was simply the kind of friendship they had. He did what? Afro said. Slapped me. In public. And then his bodyguards kneeled. All 12 of them. A pause. Adwoa, that man is in love with you already. Afro, that is insane. He is a criminal. A rich criminal. That is not the relevant detail here. What did he look like? Adwoa opened her mouth. Closed it. Oh no, Afro said. He's fine, isn't he? He is absolutely fine. I'm hanging up. You're going to that dinner. I am not. Adwoa Mensa. You are going to that dinner, you are wearing something that makes his brain stop working, and you are going to call me immediately after. I will stay up. Adwoa hung up. She went to the dinner. She wore something that made his brain stop working. The restaurant was not a restaurant, exactly. It was the entire top floor of a private building in Gangnam that Ji-hoon apparently owned, converted for the evening into a single dining space with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking Seoul at night. The city spread out below them like scattered diamonds. A live jazz quartet played softly in the corner. The table was set for 2. Adwoa walked in, looked at all of it, and said, "This is excessive." Ji-hoon, who was already standing by the window in a charcoal suit that should have been illegal, turned around. His eyes moved over her once, quickly, before he controlled them, and something flickered in his expression that he did not quite manage to hide. "You said extravagantly," he said. "I said extravagantly, not absurdly. There's a jazz band." "You don't like jazz." "I love jazz. That's not the point." They sat down. The first 10 minutes were the most careful conversation Adwoa had ever navigated. They spoke in Korean, then English, then Korean again, feeling out the edges of each other. Ji-hoon was formal. Precise. He chose his words with the focus of someone accustomed to every syllable having consequences. But then the food arrived. Adwoa took one bite, put her fork down, and looked at him. "This is Ghanaian food," she said. "Kontamaya stew. Keluele. Omo tuo." He said the names carefully, with the pronunciation of someone who had practiced. "I had my chef research it this morning." Adwoa stared at him. "You researched my food," she said. It seemed appropriate. A pause. "Is it correct?" She picked up her fork again and took another bite. The kontamaya was perfect, rich and green, spiced exactly right, the kind of warmth that felt like being handed something familiar in a foreign place. "It's correct," she said quietly. Something softened between them. Not much. But enough. "The apology," she said, setting her fork down again and folding her hands. "Let's hear it." Ji-hoon looked at her across the table. In the candlelight, he looked different than he had in the ballroom. Less like a weapon. Still dangerous, she was not foolish enough to forget what he was, but the sharp edges had something underneath them that she had not expected. Something tired. Something old. "What I said to you," he began. "And what I did." He paused. "There is no version of it that is acceptable. I know that." Another pause. "I was angry about something unrelated. I transferred it. That is also not acceptable." His jaw tightened. "I am sorry." Silence. Was that the whole apology? Adwoa asked. "Yes." "Him." She picked up her fork again. It was actually quite good. Very little defensive language. "No, I'm sorry if you felt direct. You're grading my apology." "I'm a lawyer. I grade everything." His mouth moved. Not quite a smile. Almost. "Tell me about Ghana," he said. And the way he said it, low and genuine, like he actually wanted to know, disarmed her before she could prepare for it. She told him. And then he talked. Slowly, carefully, like a man unfolding something he had kept locked for a very long time. About Seoul. About the streets he had grown up on. Not about the empire, she did not ask, and he did not offer, but about the city itself, the early mornings before it woke up, the way the Han River looked in winter. They talked for 4 hours. When Adwoa finally looked at her phone, she had 6 missed messages from Afro and it was past midnight. She looked up and found Ji-hoon watching her with an expression she had not seen on him yet. Open. Unguarded. Almost startled by itself. I have to go, she said. He stood when she stood. Walked her to the elevator himself, not the bodyguards. Him. At the elevator door, he stopped. Tomorrow, he said. I have meetings tomorrow, she said. After the meetings. She looked at him. He looked at her. You are relentless, she said. Yes, he agreed, in the same flat, sincere tone he had used the night before. Adwoa stepped into the elevator. She pressed the button for the lobby. Just before the doors closed, she said, "Don't be late." The doors closed on the most unguarded expression she had seen on Park Ji-hoon's face yet. In her pocket, her phone was already buzzing. Afro. She answered immediately. Tell me everything, Afro shrieked. Adwoa leaned against the elevator wall. And then, alone, she let herself smile, wide and real and slightly helpless. I'm in trouble, she told her best friend. I know, Afro said gleefully. The best kind. Seoul in the early morning was a different city. Adwoa had discovered this on her first day, that if you woke before 5 and stood at your hotel window, you could see the real Seoul undressing itself from the night. Street vendors setting up their tarts in the half-dark. Delivery men weaving through empty roads. The Han River sitting still and silver like it was gathering itself for the day ahead. She was thinking about this, and trying very hard not to think about a charcoal suit and the way candlelight had changed a man's face, when her phone rang at 6:43 in the morning. The number was one she did not recognize. She answered anyway, because she always answered, because you never knew. Good morning. Ji-hoon's voice. Lower in the morning. Rougher at the edges. Adwoa sat up in her hotel bed. How do you have this number? I have every number. That is a concerning thing to say first thing in the morning. Are you awake? I'm talking to you, aren't I? I want to show you something before your meetings. Get dressed. I'll be downstairs in 20 minutes. Adwoa pulled the phone away from her ear and looked at it. Then she put it back. You know, most people begin with "Is this a good time?" Is this a good time? No. I'll be downstairs in 20 minutes. He hung up. Adwoa stared at her phone. Then she got up and got dressed in 90 minutes purely out of spite, just so she could be in the lobby before him. He was already there. He was standing by the entrance in a dark navy coat, hands in his pockets, watching the street outside. Without the ballroom context, without the bodyguards flanking him, without the full armor of his social role, he looked almost ordinary. Almost. But there was something in the way he stood that reminded her of what he actually was. A stillness that was not peaceful. The stillness of something that was always, in some part of itself, prepared. He turned when he heard her footsteps. His eyes went to her face first. Then down briefly. Then back up. You're early, he said. You're surprised, she said. No, he admitted. Which was somehow the right answer. He took her to the fish market. Noryangjin fish market, before the tourists arrived, before the crowds, just the vendors and the catch in the cold morning air smelling of salt and sea. It was so far from anything she had expected from him that she stopped walking twice just to verify that this was real. Ji-hoon moved through the market like he had been coming here for years. Because, she learned, he had, every Thursday morning since he was 26, when a vendor named Mr. O had once given him a free bowl of fish soup on a morning when he'd had nothing else. You still come back? Adwoa asked, watching him exchange a warm and completely unguarded greeting with Mr. O that bore no resemblance whatsoever to the man in the ballroom. Every week, he said. She accepted a bowl of hot fish soup from Mr. O, who beamed at her like she was personally responsible for a good harvest, and she stood at the edge of the market with Ji-hoon and ate it while the sun came up over Seoul. This, she said between spoonfuls, is the best thing I have eaten in Korea. Ji-hoon looked quietly pleased. They walked back along the river after. His bodyguards were present, she had learned to spot them, 3 men always within visual range, never interrupting, but keeping their distance. "Who are your enemies?" she asked, because she was Adwoa Mensah and she did not believe in approaching important questions sideways. Ji-hoon glanced at her. "Many," he said. "Ones who would use me to get to you." He stopped walking. He turned to look at her fully, and his face did something complicated. "You're asking if I've put you in danger by being seen with you. I'm asking if I need to adjust my security arrangements." "You have security arrangements?" "I am a diplomatic envoy representing 5 governments. Of course I have security arrangements." She raised an eyebrow. "But I'd like to know whether I need more." He was quiet for a moment. A longer moment than she liked. "There is a man," he said finally. "Choi Sung-woo. He and I have been opposing each other for several years. He has been watching me more carefully lately. If he identifies you, then I become leverage." "Yes." Adwoa nodded slowly. "All right," she said. "Then we should be careful about where we're seen together. At least until the negotiations are further along and my diplomatic protections are more publicly established." Ji-hoon looked at her. "You're not going to tell me to stay away from you?" "No," she said. "I considered it. I decided it was the boring option." Something in his expression shifted. "You're not afraid of this?" "I am afraid of many things," she corrected. "But not of this." She looked back at the river. "I grew up in Accra. I have sat across tables from men who wanted to use me as leverage. I have survived every single one of them." She glanced at him sideways. "Your drama is frankly not even in my top 10. A sound escaped him. She turned to look. He was laughing. A real laugh, short, surprised, entirely genuine, and it changed his whole face into something that stole her breath a little against her will. "Top 10, he repeated. "Easily," she said serenely. He shook his head slowly. And then he did something that surprised her more than the laugh. He reached over, carefully, and tucked a loose strand of her hair back from her face. Just one strand. His fingers barely grazed her temple. They both went still. "Sorry," he said. "You had." "I know," she said. Neither of them moved for a moment. Then Adwoa cleared her throat and looked back at the river. "Don't be late tonight," she said. "I mean it this time." "I know," he said. He said it the same way she had said it the night before, like a quiet echo. Like something understood between them that neither of them was quite ready to name yet. Behind them, 3 bodyguards exchanged a look. Sergeant Beck rubbed the back of his neck and said nothing, because there was nothing to say. Something was happening. And it was only going to get more complicated from here. The next 3 days were the kind of days that Adwoa would spend the rest of her life trying to find the right words for. They fell into a rhythm that felt both impossible and inevitable, like a song you've never heard before that you somehow already know all the words to. Mornings, the fish market twice more, or a walk before the city woke, coffee from a tiny shop near Gyeongbokgung Palace where the owner recognized Ji-hoon and pretended not to, which made Adwoa like the owner immediately. Afternoons, Adwoa in her meetings, doing the work she had come here to do, serious, technical, important work that she loved and was brilliant at. Ji-hoon in his own world, which she only glimpsed the edges of, phone calls that made people on the other end go very quiet, meetings that Sergeant Beck reported back from with the expression of a man who needed a long rest. Evenings, together. A different place each time. A rooftop barbecue restaurant where they sat on opposite sides of a grill and fed each other pieces of perfectly marinated beef without either of them acknowledging what a tremendously romantic thing that was to do. A night market in Insadong where Adwoa bought a small ceramic bowl with a crack of blue glaze and argued cheerfully with the vendor about the price entirely for the sport of it while Ji-hoon stood behind her looking both entertained and helpless. A private screening of an old Korean film she had mentioned once in passing that he had somehow arranged within 6 hours. The banter between them had developed its own language. She needled him about his inability to take a compliment. He looked at her sideways whenever she did something that delighted him, which she was coming to recognize as his version of a standing ovation. She made him laugh 3 more times, real laughs, not the controlled social variety, and she was beginning to understand that this was not a small thing. But it was on the 4th evening that everything shifted. They were on the rooftop of his building, not the restaurant floor, the actual rooftop, where someone had placed 2 chairs and a small table and where the entirety of Seoul glittered below them like a living thing. It was cold. She had not dressed for rooftop cold and she was pretending she hadn't noticed. Ji-hoon noticed. Without a word, he stood, disappeared for approximately 90 seconds, and returned with a large blanket that he draped around her shoulders. Then he sat back down. Then he reached across the small space between their chairs and held the edges of the blanket closed near her collar, so it wouldn't slip. He didn't let go. They were very close. Ji-hoon, Adwoa said. Adwoa, he said. His voice was very low. We should probably talk about what this is, she said. Yes, he agreed. Neither of them talked about it. I leave in 11 days, she said. I know. My work takes me to 3 more countries after Korea. I know. You run a criminal empire. Yes. Those are significant obstacles. Yes. His eyes were on her face. Very close. Very steady. Do you want me to let go of the blanket? Adwoa looked at him. No, she said. And somehow, neither of them could fully account for the mechanics of how it happened, only that it did. The distance between them closed. He kissed her softly. Just once. Just briefly. Then he pulled back and looked at her like he was asking a question. She answered it by leaning forward and kissing him back, less softly, less briefly, one hand coming up to the lapel of his coat. When they separated, the city below them carried on being entirely unimpressed. Seoul did not stop for anyone. But on that rooftop, both of them were very still. This complicates things, Adwoa said. Everything I want complicates things, Ji-hoon said. I've made my peace with it. She studied him. You're not going to be dramatic about this, are you? No, I can't let you get close to me. I'm too dangerous. Speech? Because I will leave this rooftop immediately. His expression flickered. No speech. Good. She settled back in her chair, pulling the blanket tighter. Then pour me more coffee and tell me about the first time you came to this rooftop. He poured the coffee. He told her. And when she fell asleep in the chair an hour later, because it was warm and his voice was steady and she was, underneath all her discipline, only human, he did not wake her. He draped another blanket over her and sat in the cold and watched Seoul breathe below them and felt something in his chest he had spent 15 years convincing himself was no longer possible. Sergeant Beck found him still sitting there at 2 in the morning. He looked at his boss. He looked at the sleeping woman wrapped in blankets. He looked back at his boss. Sir, he whispered. Not a word, Beck, Ji-hoon said quietly. Not a word, sir, Beck agreed. But he was smiling as he walked away. Full and genuine and wide. She found out about Choi Sung-woo on a Wednesday. Not from Ji-hoon, from her own intelligence sources, because Adwoa Mensah did not exist in the world without knowing who was watching her. Her security coordinator, a sharp-eyed Ghanaian woman named Amma who had been with her for 4 years, knocked on her hotel suite door at 8 in the morning with a tablet and a grave expression. Someone photographed you at the night market, Amma said. And at the fish market. They've been passed to a third party. Adwoa looked at the images on the tablet. Herself and Ji-hoon, side by side, his hand near the small of her back, laughing at something. Herself eating soup with her eyes closed because the soup had been genuinely transcendent. 3 images in total. Who is the third party? She asked. Amma told her. Adwoa called Ji-hoon before Amma had finished leaving the room. He answered on the first ring. I know, he said. Beck informed me 20 minutes ago. Choi Sung-woo has photographs of us. Yes. What does he want with them? A pause that she did not like. He will try to use your diplomatic status. If he can create the appearance of an improper relationship between you and me, suggest that your negotiations are compromised by personal involvement, he can damage the trade agreement. He's targeting the negotiations. He has business interests that the agreement threatens. He's been looking for a way to destabilize it. His voice went quieter. I'm sorry. This is because of me. Stop that, Adwoa said briskly. We can be sorry later. Right now I need to know his timetable. When would he move? Before Monday's opening session. He'd want the story circulating in the press by Sunday night. That gives us 4 days. She was already thinking, already mapping the steps. I need to get ahead of it. A formal statement confirming my diplomatic status and noting that any attempt to compromise these negotiations is itself a criminal act under international trade law. She paused. I'll also need you to stay away from me publicly for the next 72 hours. Silence. Ji-hoon. I heard you. It's tactical. Not personal. Another silence. I know, he said. But something in his voice was very tight. I'll call you tonight, she said, softer now. Don't, he said. Not on this line. Beck will send you a secure number. All right. Adwoa. Yes. A very long pause. Be careful. She felt the weight of those two words, the specific weight of them, coming from him, a man who had spent 15 years being careful enough for everyone. A man for whom that word meant something entirely different than it meant for ordinary people. Always, she said. And meant it. She spent the next 4 days being magnificent. The statement went out Wednesday afternoon, drafted by Adwoa herself in language so precise and legally ironclad that the 4 government representatives she sent it to for review sent it back with nothing changed. It did not mention Ji-hoon. It did not need to. It simply established, publicly and unambiguously, that any interference with the envoy or the negotiations would be treated as an act of deliberate subversion of international trade law. Choi Sung-woo's people went quiet. Not permanently, Adwoa was not naive. But they went quiet. And on Saturday night, 48 hours before the negotiations opened, her hotel room phone rang. Not her cell. The hotel phone. She picked it up. Look out your window, Ji-hoon said. She crossed to the window. On the street below the hotel, which was a busy street, a public street, full of Saturday evening foot traffic, stood a man in a dark coat. Looking up. She pressed her hand flat against the glass. He pressed his hand flat against nothing, just the night air between them. It was the most ridiculous thing she had ever seen. She pressed her lips together very hard against a smile and lost the battle completely. This is absurd, she said into the phone. Yes, he agreed. You are standing on a public street. Yes. Anyone could photograph this. Yes. You don't care. A pause. No, he said. I don't. Adwoa stood at her window with her hand against the glass and her heart doing something entirely unprofessional in her chest. Go home, Ji-hoon, she said. Good night, Adwoa, he said. He did not move for another 3 minutes. She stood at the window the whole time. Sunday arrived with grey skies and a wind off the Han River that meant business. Adwoa spent the morning reviewing her documents for Monday, line by line, clause by clause, the way she had been trained and the way she trained herself. This work mattered. 5 governments. Millions of livelihoods tied to whether she walked into that room tomorrow and performed at her absolute best. She was ready. She knew she was ready. But by 3 in the afternoon, with everything reviewed and her notes in order and nothing left to prepare that wasn't already prepared, she found herself doing something she rarely allowed herself to do. She sat quietly. And she thought about what she was walking into. Not the negotiations, that she could manage. Ji-hoon. She had done the honest accounting in her head several times over the last week and arrived at the same number each time. The feelings were real. That was not the question. The question was what to do with real feelings about a man who was, by any straightforward measure, deeply complicated. He ran a criminal organization. She represented governments. Those 2 facts sat at opposite ends of a very wide table. And yet, the fish market in the early morning. The way he'd had his chef learn to make kontomaya stew. The hand against the window on a public street at midnight. The laugh, 3 times, then 4, then she'd lost count, that belonged to someone much younger and much less defended than the man the world saw. She was still sitting with these thoughts when the secure line Beck had sent buzzed. Come tonight. There's something I need to show you. Jay. She went. He took her somewhere she had not expected, not a restaurant, not a rooftop. A community center in a quieter district of Seoul, tucked between a laundry and a PC cafe, the kind of building that does not call attention to itself. Inside, children. 42 of them, she counted later. Ages ranging from 5 to 16. After-school programs, tutoring, meals, arts. The whole operation running on a tight budget and the evident passion of the 3 staff members who ran it. Ji-hoon stood at the back of the room and watched the children with the particular expression of a man trying very hard not to let his face betray how much something matters to him. "You fund this," she said. "Not a question." "Anonymously," he said. "How many centers?" A pause. 11. In Seoul. 6 in Busan. He kept his eyes on the children. "There are more outside the city." Adwoa was quiet for a long moment. "How long?" she asked. 15 years. He finally looked at her. "Since I had enough money to start. Since I understood that the system that shaped me was going to keep shaping other children the same way unless someone put something else in the path." She looked back at the room. A girl of about 8 was explaining something to a younger boy with great seriousness, pointing at a book. The boy was nodding as if receiving wisdom from a mountaintop. "You're not what you appear to be," Adwoa said. "No," Ji-hoon said. "I'm worse in some ways and better in others. I wanted you to see both." She turned to look at him fully. "Why?" He met her eyes. "Because you see clearly. And I wanted to be seen clearly." A pause. "By you specifically." The room was warm. Outside, the grey Sunday sky had given way to actual rain against the windows, and somewhere in the building a child was laughing at something. Adwoa reached out and took his hand. Just that. He looked down at their joined hands with an expression that broke her heart a little, not sadly, but with the particular ache of recognizing something precious when you see it. "I have to go home in 6 days," she said. "I know. I don't want to talk about what that means yet." "Neither do I." She squeezed his hand once. He squeezed back, firm, certain. They stood in the back of that community center and watched the children for an hour, and neither of them said much, and it was one of the most complete silences Adwoa had ever shared with another person. When they left, stepping out into the rain, Ji-hoon held an umbrella over both of them without comment. They were standing close enough that there was no pretending it was anything other than what it was. A woman across the street watched them with visible curiosity. "We'll be photographed," Adwoa noted. "I know," Ji-hoon said. "You really don't care anymore." "About that?" "No. What do you care about?" He looked down at her from under the umbrella. Rain on the awning above them. The smell of wet Seoul streets. "Currently," he said. "Just the 6 days." Adwoa pressed her lips together. That, she told him, was almost poetic. "Don't tell anyone. Your secret is safe." She paused. "Ji-hoon." "Adwoa. Kiss me before I change my mind about how complicated this is." He did. Right there on the street, in the rain, with the umbrella slightly tilted and the woman across the road watching with undisguised delight. And it was nothing like the rooftop kiss, soft and questioning. This was something decided. Something that had been building for a week in fish markets and candlelit dinners and one hand pressed flat against cold glass. When it ended, Adwoa took a breath. "Right," she said. "Complicated." "Yes," Ji-hoon said. He sounded pleased about it. The negotiations opened Monday morning. Adwoa walked into that conference room and became a completely different version of herself. Or rather, the fullest version of herself, the one who had been built across years and continents and hard-won expertise. She was precise and brilliant and calm and the kind of present that made other people in the room sit up a little straighter without knowing why. She was extraordinary. Ji-hoon watched a 20-second clip of the opening proceedings that someone sent him. She did not know how he got it and decided not to ask, and sat with it for a long time. He called her at 7 in the evening when her day was done. "How was it?" he asked. "Perfect," she said. "Day 1 is always about establishing tone." "I established tone." "I saw. You watched." 20 seconds. "Someone sent it." "Who?" "I have many sources." "That's unsettling." "You were extraordinary." Silence. "Ji-hoon," she said. "Yes." "Don't say things like that without warning." "Why?" "Because I'm trying to maintain a professional evening routine and you are making it difficult." He was quiet for a moment and then, "Have dinner with me." "I have 5 days of negotiations." "I know. Have dinner with me anyway." She went. Each evening of that week, she went. On Monday, a small Korean Ghanaian fusion restaurant that he had discovered existed through what she suspected was an extensive and obsessive research process, where she ordered things off the menu and described each dish to him in Chi and then translated, watching his expression as the sounds of her first language settled around him. On Tuesday, she cooked. In the full kitchen of a private apartment that turned out to be a spare property he owned, she discovered this mid-cooking and issued a remark about billionaires that made him lean against the counter smiling, and she made jollof rice. Proper jollof. The kind that requires technique and attention and love. He ate 2 full plates. She pretended this did not affect her. It absolutely affected her. On Wednesday, they did nothing. She was exhausted, the negotiations were intense and she was carrying the full weight of them, and when he arrived at the restaurant where they were supposed to meet, he took one look at her face and said, "No. Come." He took her to a jjimjilbang, a Korean bathhouse, and sat across from her in a heated common room where they were both wrapped in matching spa outfits provided by the establishment, and they played Bardak, a Korean board game, badly and competitively for 2 hours while she recovered her energy. She won. He disputed the outcome with a thoroughness that suggested he was significantly less gracious in defeat than his collected exterior implied. "You cheated," he said. "I don't know how to cheat at Bardak. I learned it 4 days ago." That's exactly what a cheater would say. Park Ji-hoon. Accept defeat with dignity. Rematch. Absolutely not, I'm tired. She put down her piece. Congratulate me. A pause. Then, with visible effort, well played. Thank you. Was that so hard? Yes, he said honestly. She laughed so hard the attendant came to check on them. On Thursday, the threat from Choi Sung-woo returned. Not photographs this time, a more direct approach. An anonymous message sent to 2 members of the negotiating committee suggesting that the senior envoy had a personal conflict of interest. No specifics. Just enough to create discomfort. Adwoa found out at 10 in the morning and handled it by 11. The committee members were presented with her full diplomatic brief, character references from 3 heads of state, and a legal letter from her firm that was, by her own assessment, artistically aggressive. The matter was closed before lunch. But Ji-hoon found out about it by noon. She was genuinely starting to believe he had sources woven into the fabric of Seoul itself, and by 2 in the afternoon, Choi Sung-woo had received a visit from 3 men whose names she was not told but whose effect was apparently immediate. Ji-hoon called her at 2:15. "It's handled," he said. "I had already handled it," she said. "I know. Mine was additional." She was quiet. "Then, what did you do?" "Nothing he will complain about. He has too much to lose from a complaint." Ji-hoon. "He targeted you because of me. That's mine to address." She sat with that. "You are going to be absolutely maddening to be involved with, aren't you?" A pause. "Probably. I'm not a woman who needs rescuing." "I know. This wasn't a rescue. This was accountability." His voice was steady. "You handled your side. I handled mine." He stopped. She waited. "We're what?" she said softly. A very long pause. "I'll see you tonight," he said. "We're what, Ji-hoon?" "Tonight, Adwoa." He hung up. She sat in her hotel room with her phone in her lap and her heart doing something absolutely unreasonable in her chest. Tonight could not come fast enough. She had 2 days left in Seoul. This was a fact she had been carefully not looking at directly, the way you don't look directly at the sun. Glancing at it in her peripheral vision. Aware of it without confronting it. Saturday morning she woke to a message on the secure line from Ji-hoon. "Don't make plans today." She typed back, "I always have plans." His response, "Cancel them." She typed, "You're very demanding for someone who should be trying to impress me." His response, "I impressed you at the fish market. Now I'm just being honest." She stared at her phone. She cancelled her plans. He came to the hotel at 9, in a casual outfit, actual casual, no formal coat, dark jeans and a simple jacket that made him look like someone who had learned to relax recently and was still practicing. He had 2 coffees and a bag from the bakery near Gyeongbokgung. They spent the morning walking. Not anywhere significant. Not with a plan. They walked through Bukhan Hanok village where the old traditional houses pressed close together up the hillside, and through a small market where she bought 3 ceramic pieces she had no idea how she was going to fit in her luggage, and he carried the bag without being asked. They ate at a tiny lunch place where the menus had no English, and she translated for both of them and got one dish wrong, and they ate it anyway. She talked about home. Real home, Accra in the rainy season when the streets flooded and everyone still somehow got where they needed to go. Her grandmother's farm, the cocoa trees in rows, the sound of the compound at night. Her mother, who had worked long hours to send her to school and cried at Oxford graduation with her church hat slightly askew. He listened to all of it. "You miss it," he said. "Every day," she said. "I travel constantly. I'm good at adapting. But yes, every single day." "What's the first thing you do when you go back?" She smiled. "Go to my grandmother's house. Sit in the kitchen while she cooks. Let her argue with me about whether I'm eating enough." She paused. "She's 81. She still runs the farm herself. She would absolutely terrify you." "I'd like to meet her," Ji-hoon said. Adwoa turned to look at him. He was looking ahead, very composed, as if he had said something perfectly ordinary. "Ji-hoon," she said. "Yes." "Did you just?" "Yes." She was quiet for a moment. "You understand what that implies?" "Yes." "You understand that I'm leaving in 2 days?" "Yes." "And that after this I'm going to Nairobi, then Addis Ababa, then back to Accra?" "I know your itinerary." "Of course you do." She exhaled. "And you're not going to make a speech about how this is impossible?" "No. Because it is complicated. Many good things are." She stopped walking. He stopped beside her. They were on a narrow lane between old hanok walls, afternoon light coming in sideways, quiet except for someone's radio playing softly somewhere above them. "I need you to say it," she said. "Clearly. Because I'm a lawyer and I don't work with implications." He looked at her. Then he turned to face her fully, and the careful composed expression he wore like a suit of armor shifted, and what was underneath it was simple and true and a little afraid, not of her, but of the size of what he was about to say. "I don't want these to be our last 2 days," he said. "I want there to be more days. I want to meet your grandmother. I want to hear you laugh in Chi. I want to know what you're like when you're not on assignment." He paused. "I want to figure out what we are. However long and complicated the figuring takes." Silence. The radio above them played on. Adwoa Mensah, who had outnegotiated 3 ministers last Tuesday without breaking a sweat, who had once made a man twice her size apologize in front of his entire board, who had survived everything the world had thrown at her and come out sharper each time, felt tears prick the back of her eyes. She blinked them back before they could do anything embarrassing. "That," she said, her voice remarkably steady, "was the longest speech I have ever heard you give." "It was worth it," he said. She stepped forward and put her arms around him, not tentatively, not carefully, but fully, the way she did everything, and she felt his arms come around her with that same absolute certainty she was beginning to understand was simply how he was, underneath everything. "2 more days," she said into his shoulder. "And after," he said into her hair. They stood there in the narrow lane for a long time. Then her phone rang. She pulled back and looked at it. An unknown number. International. A prefix she recognized. She recognized it because she had spent years in this work, and there were certain prefixes that meant the world was about to become more complicated. She answered. A voice she did not recognize said 3 sentences in rapid French. Her face changed. Ji-hoon was watching her. He saw the change and went still. She hung up. "Adwoa." His voice was low and immediate. "What is it?" She looked at him. And for a moment, just a moment, something moved across her face that she had not let him see before. Not fear. Not exactly. More like the look of someone who has just been reminded of a debt they had hoped to leave behind. "I have to make some calls," she said. "Tell me what's happening." "Ji-hoon." "Tell me." She looked at him for a long moment. And then she said something in a low, careful voice that made Sergeant Beck, 3 meters behind them, close enough to hear, reach immediately for his earpiece. "Do you know a man," she said quietly, "named Victor Mensa?" Ji-hoon went very still. "He's not your family?" he asked. "He is," she said. "He's my uncle." Another pause. "What do you know about him?" Ji-hoon asked carefully. Adwoa looked at him. And the look in her eyes told him, more clearly than any words, that the answer was going to rewrite everything they thought they knew about why she was in Seoul. Not just for the negotiations. Not just for the governments. For something older. Something that had been set in motion long before they met in that ballroom. Something that now stood between them, or possibly, terrifyingly, drew them together, in a way that neither of them could have predicted. He sent me here, she said. Before the governments did. Ji-hoon stared at her. The afternoon light fell across the old hanok walls. Somewhere above them, the radio played on. And Park Ji-hoon, who had survived 15 years of a dangerous world by always knowing all the players in the room, realized he had been standing next to one without knowing it. We need to talk, he said. Yes, Adwoa said. Not here. No. Tonight. She looked at him with those clear, complicated eyes. Tonight, she said. And Ji-hoon, whatever you're about to learn about me. Adwoa. Let me finish. No, he said simply. Whatever it is, we figure it out. He held out his hand. You said that about my complications. I'm saying it about yours. She looked at his hand. She took it. And as they walked back through the narrow lane toward whatever was coming next, together, Sergeant Beck pressed his earpiece and said 3 quiet words to the man on the other end of the line. We have a problem. He paused. Or possibly, he added, glancing at the 2 figures ahead of him, hands intertwined, heading toward a storm, an entirely different story. Victor Mensa. That name. Why did Ji-hoon's blood go cold at the sound of it? And what did Adwoa's uncle have to do with the Black Dragon, and with the secret that had been locked in Ji-hoon's private files for 3 years? Part 2 is coming. And nothing, will be the same. If you need part 2 right now, comment Ghana below and I will know you are ready. Like this video, subscribe, and share it with someone who deserves a great love story today. See you in part 2.